he was connected to the Hells Angels because he'd been in prison and he made meth for them for a while. And so when the Hells Angels came to the house, I'm sure they were looking for meth. I think Travis might have been making a little supply of meth for himself when he was at the house because his behavior was so strange.
Welcome to Influence to Death, your guide for navigating the wild world of wellness influencing. Hi, and welcome to Influence to Death. I am Victoria Lafont.
I'm Hannah Wright.
And today we have a special guest. He is my best friend, Jameson Simpson. And so the title of the podcast, you might have noticed, is sort of a strange title. It is When Your $111 Raw Foodie Elixir Was Made in a Dirty Garage. And so throughout the episode, we're just going to tell that story, which is Jameson's story to tell. I was there a little bit, part of it, but it relates to being influenced to death because the raw foodie elixir in question was sold by a very well-known raw foodist influencer. So we're going to tell that story today. I'm imagining some other interesting stories will come about just because Jameson's life has been very interesting. But before that, if you want to get in touch with us.
So if y'all want to get in touch with us, you can find us at influencetodeath@gmail.com. Send us any of your episode suggestions or feedback you have. You can find us on Instagram at Influence to Death and on Substack at Influence to Death Pod.
And I actually think I said that on Substack wrong the last time. So we're on Substack. Just search Influence to Death. We're there.
Yeah.
So, okay, Jameson, do you want to tell this story?
Okay,
do you want me to set you up? Do you want me to throw the volleyball up into the air?
I think it would be best if you like coax me into various aspects of it because there's just too much to tell. Okay. I don't even know where to start. Like, do you want to start with Victor? Do you want to start
Victor?
With?
Yeah, Victor is the hinge in this whole story. So maybe let's just say this. I met Jameson in 2008. I was living in California, decided I wanted to move back to Kentucky. Things did not go great in Kentucky. I had like a serious heartbreak. Moved back to California to go back to work, just like completely heartbroken. And the first person I meet when I get back at my friend's house is Jameson. And it was in like 15 minutes. You were telling me stories and I was just like crying, laughing. So the backstory is that Jameson and I at separate times had both lived at this raw food community in Hawaii on Big Island. The land is still there, but the community that we lived at has disbanded. It's gone. But we were never there at the same time. So we met for the first time in California through these mutual friends that had also been at the community. And then we lived in Northern California in the same community for over a decade. It was for a long time. We lived there, maybe under a decade.
Yeah, it was around 10 years, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that time span, Jameson also introduced me to his friend Victor, this man that we're talking about. My impression of Victor was he from LA? You had lived with him in LA.
Okay, I met Victor in Hawaii. Like when I first went to Hawaii when I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
I think. And I met him and he was like, he had married this woman. They were probably around my age or maybe a little older, and they would just fight. Like every time I saw them, they were having like some hot-blooded exchange. It was one of those relationships where,
based on what I know.
Their what is it? Their love language is like throwing things at each other, like cursing at each other. Yeah. And Victor did this thing where he would eat avocados by peeling the peel off.
Mm-hmm.
You know how almost everyone in the world like cuts an avocado, and then they cut the pieces. He would like peel the skin off, and so I'd never seen that before. It's so weird that it even stuck with me to this day. But I was like, this is amazing, Like,
and did you ever live
that?
What's that?
I've never thought of eating an avocado that way.
Exactly. And I'd never seen an avocado without a peel, like ready to eat, So he just gingerly like peeled it off, and then he'd chew around the seed, and I was like, man, this is like groundbreaking stuff. So
These
I don't know
guys are
why
revolutionary.
it influenced me in this way where, and he did have a way of thinking outside the box. Like it represented something about him, I think, that attracted me to him. And he was just unusual. His timing was weird. You know what I mean? Like his way was not normal human way.
And you're like historically attracted to the most batshit crazy people and situations, bizarre.
Like, the thing is, what I'm attracted to in people often is like, it's a unique, it's a, you know, someone that whatever beats their own drum and does their own, you know, walks to their own rhythm and does something just in their own way. And someone that's inexorably sort of drawn to doing things in their own way. The problem with that is there's like a fine line between someone who's like walking the brink of insanity or like they're just not like following social norms because they're actually quite insane, you know, or they're quite just disconnected because they're so consumed with their own personality disorder or whatever the fuck. So,
which is totally apropos for this entire story.
Yeah. Anyway, we were friends for years, on and off. So I moved to LA when I'm not even going to give you years because I'm really bad with time. I can't remember like dates and times, but essentially I moved to LA years and years ago. And I ended up finding this cute little place in the street in Topanga Canyon. And within 2 days of moving in there, like the coincidence, Victor was living 2 doors down. And
whoa. And you had no idea.
No, I hadn't spoken to him in like 10 years.
Whoa, that's so weird.
And it's really strange. And so, like what happened was I met my neighbor and then she's like, I have a surprise for you. And I was like, what? And then she just brings Victor over. And I was like, what the fuck? Like,
did he remember you?
Of course. Yeah. And actually, he had pictures of his wedding, and there were only like 2 people at his wedding. It was like me and some other random hippie, and they got married on like a cliff or something. I don't even remember. Maybe there was a formal wedding, and I was there for the vows or whatever. They had pictures of me. I was in like his wedding pictures, and you know, I might have some of this wrong. My memory is like murky around some of these details because there's.
But I remember you telling me that you all were hanging out in Topanga Canyon, and you were both like, that's when you kind of first started to experiment with the primal diet, right?
I actually moved to LA because I had experimented with the primal diet in Hawaii. I was living in Thailand, and then I went to Hawaii and stayed. That's when I was at Pangaea.
Yeah.
And that was my first like official introduction of the primal diet. And basically, I was like, okay, I need to give this a go. So I went back to, you know, the mainland, as they call it in Hawaii, and went to LA to see Augenis and had an appointment with him. And you know,
okay, let's explain that for people.
Okay, so Augenis was the primal diet founder.
Augenis Vonderplanets was his name, his chosen name.
I think a little girl called him that or something like that. Some little, like a daughter of a friend or something called him that, and he liked the names. Augenis, was that a real name? Vonderplanets is what was made up, or was Augenis?
I think both was made. They were both made up, but I can't. I mean, I read he wrote "Eat to Live," I believe was his book.
We Want to Live.
We Want to Live. I read it, you know, whatever, in like 2002 or something or 2003 when I first got to Hawaii. So if I ever heard his real name, I think it would have been in that book. But I can't.
Yeah,
remember.
I think he talks about the name. And by the way, you should stop if I start to ramble and go off.
Oh, no. That's why we're here.
You need to like rein me the fuck in. Okay, so
we're getting to the end point to tell the story of the title of the podcast. But this is great. Okay. So let's talk about the primal diet for just a second. It's why you were in LA, and it's interesting, and it connects into all of it.
It does. It all connects. So I had, just to explain why I was even interested in the primal diet, I had basically I had this rash on my face. It felt like someone had poured hydrochloric acid on my skin. It was burning all the time and itching. And
now we know you probably had rosacea. Likely.
Well, I don't, you know,
you don't think it was?
I don't know what I went to different dermatologists and they called it different things. Ultimately, it was an inflammatory response to electromagnetic fields. That's what I discovered after years of digging. And it took me a lot. Like at the time that I moved to LA, I still had no idea that's what was going on with me. I just thought I thought it was one of the obvious things. It was an allergy. It was a food allergy. It was something physical. It was something I could see, And in Thailand, I was experimenting with, I experimented with, whatchamacallit, instincto eating. You know about instincto?
We've
No.
just only briefly.
Okay,
Yeah.
very briefly, instincto. Boy,
Which is short for instinctive
Instinctive
eating.
eating.
Yeah. So it's basic. Isn't it funny? It's not really shortened. It's the same number of syllables. Why did they change?
Instincto. I mean,
Anyway,
that
I don't know.
tracks for
Maybe I
instincto.
fucked it up. I don't know. Yeah. It sounds so silly, but basically it's where you eat based on your, okay, so you're supposed to eat based on your instincts. And
Yeah.
the idea is you only eat food that is not denatured. So food that is not, like we were talking about processing earlier.
Right.
It's not processed, right? That's just like food. It's just from the tree, or I guess from the animal.
They do, but they do dairy? I don't think Instinctos do dairy, but I can't remember.
I can't remember either. I think they'll do anything that's, I mean, in theory, you could do raw milk, right? As long as you could just get it and not mess with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's like a very particular way that they go about determining.
One of the ways, one of the ways is to put a blindfold on and to like test, because basically, if you remove your sight, the vision aspect of eating, then in theory it amplifies your sense of taste and your smell, right? Which does make sense. And then and so it guides you in a different way than your associations, which has to do with your vision, right? So
but tell her that the process is that, like, when people are first starting to learn how to be instinctive eaters, the person that's kind of like training them or like guiding them this was my experience, Jameson, and I don't know if you had this in Thailand, but like at Pangaea, they would like take somebody into the kitchen or wherever, and they would put out like 15 different foods, blindfold the person. They would like go through and smell each food until they got what was called a hit, where it was like, oh my God, I smell this. And like their body would respond positively. And then they would eat as much of that food as they wanted until they got to stop. Like they felt like, oh, I don't want any more of that.
Said. That's perfect.
And then it was like, sometimes they would take the blindfold off and somebody had been eating like rotten coconut or
totally, or like some green meat or like some,
and then they would be just like totally disgusted. But Hannah, it kind of reminds me, I mean, it is a very extreme example, but of the
Clara Davis study.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Do you want to just detail that? Talk that out.
So the Clara Davis nurse study, it was, I think, in the 30s, between the 1920s and 1930s. I'm like you, Jameson, the date. I'm not good with dates, but basically it was conducted at an orphanage, and it was run by, nurses. And one of the head nurses, Clara Davis, she started noticing that the kids there would have very particular like choices for food. And so a lot of the kids coming in had severe nutrient deficiencies. So they had like scurvy, they had rickets. And so they would present them with like 15 or 20 different foods that in their whole form, kind of like what you're talking about. So in the photos, it's like canned tomatoes or tomato juice, oranges, cod liver oil, butter, meat, bread, like all these different things. And then they would just put it in front of the kid, and kids as young as like a year old. And they would let the kid choose what they wanted. And they started to realize that the kids were choosing these foods in a way that didn't really track with like what you think a kid would choose. So they're not choosing the orange. They're choosing the cod liver oil and like drinking a lot of cod liver oil, which doesn't taste very good. And then eventually they wouldn't want any more of it. They'd be presented this multiple times a day.
Wow.
And they started to realize that it tracked with their vitamin deficiencies. So when they were doing blood testing, for instance, the kids who had rickets, which is vitamin D, severe vitamin D deficiency, would be choosing cod liver oil, which is a very good source, a natural source of vitamin D. And they would pick that food until they corrected their deficiency. Of course, the kids don't know they have a deficiency.
Right.
And then they would move on to something else. And then the kids maybe who had scurvy or had very low vitamin C, they had some symptoms like their gums were bleeding, stuff like that. They would choose tomatoes or oranges or some other like vitamin C rich food. It's really fascinating, but it's also used a lot in probably like Weston A. Price and like more like also primal food movements to kind of illustrate that you have this innate knowledge that you have to learn how to tap into, because as adults, we lose that because we're so muddled by external influences. But as a child, you're really pure and you're trusting those instincts.
It's really cool. It's actually a very cool idea. I like, actually, as you're talking about it, it's almost like I want to make fun of it, but then I'm like, it's really like no wonder I experimented with it, because there's something really alluring about this idea of getting back in touch with your instinctual side, which is something that every other animal on Earth obviously has to some degree. I mean, obviously, domesticated animals, you don't see it in as much of that going on, right? But with wild animals, it's like a baby deer knows what the hell to eat. Just knows, like, how, you know?
Yeah, and so that's kind of what they were trying to like do with Instincto. Okay, so you had experimented with Instincto, but there was this kind of overlap, and I just want to explain this to people. There's an overlap between instinctive eating and the primal diet. The primal diet was a completely raw food form of I guess a raw food form of raw foodism. It was a raw food form of eating meat, cheese, milk, all, like omnivoric, but raw. So
you can't cook anything?
Not on the primal diet.
But it's very different than Instincto in like a lot of ways, right?
You just
like he's got
ad libitum.
There's very specific types of food that he recommends, and like it's not about following your instincts at all. It's really about like
it's actually about pushing against them in some ways. Like in primal, Augenis would be like, you need to just like eat until you just want to puke. Like you just eat. You have times of doing that, and then you have times of fasting where you he kind of had like a bulk cut part of the,
like he would
be like, it's like changing your oil. That's how he would talk about it.
That's right. Yeah. Where you gain like mass first. And then his whole idea was most of the toxins are stored in the fat of the body. And so you want to put on as much fat as you can to protect your organs and your nervous system and so on. And then you dump the fat.
Right. You lose weight.
And it's a cool idea. Again, like there's like some really, there's something in there, right? The guy had something.
So this guy, Augenis, can I give a
Augenis, I love it.
Augenis.
It doesn't matter.
I have no idea who that is, so I just looked him up on the internet. Can I say something about him?
Yes, please.
I'm assuming listeners have no idea who he is.
They don't. Not. And let's also just say he's deceased. He is now, he died in a
terrible, like a balcony actually came unscrewed. So he apparently, he said that he had a few attempts on his life. I'm just saying that's what he said. And it is pretty weird. Like he was standing on a balcony and just the screws came loose and the balcony fell. He died.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Why would someone want to kill him?
Well, he was actually, the only thing that I can figure out is that if it was true, if he was very outspoken about food rights, and he was
in California.
He was very active in protecting people's food rights, even if they weren't primal or whatever. And he was actually the force behind raw milk being legalized in California.
Well, he and Sally Fallon worked together.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
So it does make sense that, some people weren't very happy with him, because obviously if you want to push industrialized food onto people and you want people to buy that stuff or whatever, I don't know who would be the most threatened by that. But to this day, you see raw milk is constantly under attack for no really good reason, in my opinion. So, maybe, I don't know.
I had no idea that's who. So he also, let me just say who this guy is. So it says that this is Wikipedia, by the way. I'm just going to be great.
We could read Jameson's Wikipedia after Augenis.
No, it's gone.
You have a Wikipedia about you?
I used to, yeah, but it got taken down. Yeah.
We'll talk about that after you read your...
So Augenis claimed that he was diagnosed with terminal cancer in his early life, but he experienced remission via raw carrot juice and raw dairy, which actually that I've heard of that before. Carrot juice with dairy being like a treatment for certain illnesses that are used in like clinics in Europe.
This, I think, is a big one they claim.
Yeah. It would be a great source of vitamin A, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that was when he was around 21. And then he started to practice nutritional counseling, education, really. By age 25, he adopted a raw plant-based diet, So this would have been so he was born in 1947. So that would have been what, in the 60s? Yeah.
Yeah.
So then after raw plant-based, a few years later, he added raw meat. And then he said that was like way better. That really improved healing with the raw meat added in. And then in 1997, he published that book y'all mentioned, We Want to Live. He became a leading alternative nutritionist. He made miraculous claims of his clients routinely curing their diseases. And obviously, his protocols were untested and there was controversy around them. And then in 2001, he founded the nonprofit Right to Choose Healthy Foods. Mm-hmm. And those efforts led to the end of LA County's ban on the retail sale of raw milk. So raw milk was able to be sold due to his efforts. And then everywhere else, because obviously this is still a thing, he figured out how to circumvent laws banning the sale of raw milk. So he invented animal leasing, where a dairy farm is leased to a private food club or person, which elects to omit pasteurization. So that is still ongoing. That's like,
he was a force.
I buy raw milk. I buy it because I bought a herd share, quote unquote.
You own part of the cow. So legally it's your cow.
Exactly. Super fascinating. I've never heard of this guy. And
he was really, isn't that amazing?
Huge impact. Yeah.
He had this huge impact.
And he just was like so purpose driven.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was a force.
He was on a mission. Yeah.
And just to clarify for people that are listening, Augenus is not the raw food influencer we're talking about with the dirty garage elixir. Okay. It's a totally different person. We are just basically getting to that part of the story by talking about Jameson's history. So just to clarify that might be a little bit confusing for people. Yeah. Okay. So Jameson, there's one other caveat. So I said, Jameson, we can read his Wikipedia. I didn't even say this, but so Jameson for years, how many, like 20 years, was a professional infographic artist.
Yeah, long time.
And is published in like, you name whatever,
Yeah, whatever. New York Times and Wired and all this.
All over the place. So if you look at some of his illustrations, all of us are in there. There's like book illustrations that it's me. It's like my face or John's face or like.
Because I use you guys as models. Yeah.
Yeah, we would have to be models. So anyway, that's all happening. That's how Jameson's making money in the midst
to support all my weird experiments. Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. So you get from Thailand to Hawaii and you get introduced to Instincto in Thailand and then to the Primal Diet in Hawaii.
Essentially, I'm in Thailand. This is when I was really, okay. So looking back, sometimes you can't connect the dots for years after something happens. And then you just see the whole thing laid out and you see how everything connected. And so at the time, I didn't realize that putting a wireless tower in my yard in order to get a signal, because wireless wasn't that ubiquitous yet, right? And so like you could get it in Thailand, but you needed a special antenna because it had to be bounced to you from somewhere. And so I literally got a tower erected in my yard. And my electrosensitivity, which I didn't know that's what it was at that point, just went fucking bananas. Like my face was just, I looked like a swimmer that, was basically like had chlorine burn or something on my face.
That is, we should have are we going to have an episode about EMFs? That's really interesting.
We could, yeah.
I'm happy to talk about that whole thing.
So you put the tower up in your yard in Thailand.
So I put up the tower. I'm having like crazy symptoms to the point where like, I'm embarrassed to go out. Like, it's funny. You don't realize how much you take your physical appearance as just being a human with normal colored skin, and what this is like, Victoria, until you don't have that and you feel suddenly like the Elephant Man, even if other people don't perceive you to that extreme. But the emotional attachment and the image of yourself that you have and all that stuff, right? So I'm like kind of hiding out in the house a little bit because I only go out like minimally because I don't want people to see me, and because I'm embarrassed. And then that just went on for years.
And which is making it worse because you're just more and more exposed to this EMF source that's in your front yard.
It's just a vicious cycle where like you don't go out and then you're in the house all the time. You're exposed to all the devices that are causing the problem. And it's like the first time that I actually noticed that there was an absolute connection between something at my home causing this and, the rash being there and it disappearing was when I went to do, it was like a survival course with
Tom Brown.
Yeah, Tom Brown. That was the first time in years where I went for a week or 2 weeks or however long it was, and the rash and the symptoms pretty much went away. And as soon as I returned home, they came back. And so, but then you're thinking like, okay, geopathic stress, like ley lines, like, is it like water? You start getting so crazy when you have something you're trying to uncover the underlying cause of, and you're not making progress with it. And you start feeling like a mad person. You just like,
okay. And I think this is a really good point to point out, because it's a through line, Jameson, through every topic that we cover, which is people are being influenced, on social media or on the internet or in their real life, right? Like we have these ideas that are being spread. And part of the reason that they're so appealing is because there are people who are just trying to find answers and better themselves, and they don't have the answers. Right. So there's this vacuum that's created. And then these ideas that we basically don't know if they're valid sometimes or not. I mean, sometimes it's more obvious than others, come in and they fill that space. The problem is that, it's like we're saying, they're not validated. We don't know. So it's interesting that you're saying that, because it's like, yeah, we keep stumbling over that in almost every episode where
really
it's like,
interesting. Yeah.
That's happening with carnivore. That's happening with the keto diet. Like it's happening with so many different highly influenced ideas that are being spread out there. And it's like something that you've experienced also.
I have a question for you. Do you think that we'll ever come to a point, either of you, where we've got such a handle on all of these different manifestations of, unbalanced whatever in the body, disease or whatever you want to call it, lack of homeostasis? Like, do you think we'll ever come to a point where we actually have research-based understanding of everything? Or is this just going to be a rabbit hole that never ends because new things will crop up? And I don't know. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but it seems like there's so many variables to me, and there's so many unique manifestations of things that I wonder if we'll ever be able to, like clinically point at everything and have proof that this works and this doesn't work. And also, like, all of the science is mixed. Like, there's not like some unanimous. It's so funny when you hear in media, like, well, scientists say, like, or, the science says, and it's like, well, that's not really, but the science says all these different things. Like, what? You're just cherry picking. So what do you guys think about that?
I don't think ever that will happen. Not in our lifetime. Just about health wise things, like we're so complex and there's so many things that we don't really know, like the mechanisms, like exactly behind how something works. And our environment is changing drastically as far as the toxicants we're exposed to, the, stress we're exposed to, like all of these external factors that influence our health. So, I think we'll probably get some things figured out, but like also then you think about the interest behind research topics is like, it's just not there, or it's not genuine or pure. So it's being influenced by a pharmaceutical company or this or that. So it's like, no, that's
a mess.
Not hopeful to me.
Yeah, it's a mess. Like, that's totally true. That's a really good point about, first and foremost, a lot of people aren't very interested. They just aren't. Like, people don't. And I
don't blame them. They're interested in what they're interested in.
That's right. They're just not interested. Like, if you don't have a health problem, it's like the motivation isn't probably going to be there to try to uncover the stuff. Like,
one of the interests that, I think we're very graceful in exploring this, but we definitely explore it, is that wellness is $1 trillion industry on our side, right? I'm not even talking about conventional medicine. That's a completely different set of metrics financially for them. On our side of the fence, we're in the trillions at this point. Yeah. So that's an interest, right? You know what I mean? I know it's an interest on the other side of the fence too. It's just like, I don't have as much education or experience on that side of the fence. And I try to just like apply the knowledge that we have. I hate to even say we're on two sides of the fence. It's like, we're basically all trying to, people in their heart of hearts, to figure things out. But it's like, of course, humans get in our own way all the time.
And there's a lot of rats. I mean, let's be
Yeah.
honest. Like, there's a lot of disingenuous stuff happening, and there's a lot of people that mean well and don't know what they're talking about. There's a real mix of stuff.
Totally. There's a total, yes,
there, like,
there's a total mix. And I mean, it seems like we kind of, I think, Hannah, you agree with me on this, but I'm curious to hear what you think. It's like we just try to approach things charitably and with as much humor as possible because, like, why not? We're in this, so we might as well like poke at it curiously with like the assumption that people are trying to do their best and laugh at ourselves because we're going to experience it no matter what, you know? So, okay. But Jameson, we're going to say, okay. So you put up, this is something also that we haven't said outright, but I think people are starting to understand. When I met Jameson, it was like becoming clear and clear and clear to you that you were highly sensitive to electromagnetic fields.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like a very like intense physical.
It was intense. Like, I would know if someone had a cell phone tower or a cell phone tower. Yeah, like, of course I would know if someone had a cell phone tower with them. I would know if someone had a cell phone turned on in the house. Like, because we lived in an area that was so quiet. Okay, so the higher you go, like the higher altitude you go, actually the more you tend to be exposed to all that high frequency wireless stuff. It's just how it works. And so we were down in a valley, and there was actually such terrible service down there that it was just protected. It just had that quality to it. And we were living in this old, looked like a log, just like a kind of a rundown log cabin house. And so people would come over to visit, and they'd have their cell phone on, and I would immediately my diaphragm would start cramping. I would start feeling tingling in my head. I would get all these symptoms, and then be like, every time I'd think, you're fucking crazy. Like, you're making it up. But I need to say something just to see, because I don't want to. What would happen is, if it's like once the inflammation kicked in, there was a cascade that would start, and it was hard for me to kind of unwind. And so I would knee jerk try to prevent that. So as soon as I'd start feeling symptoms, I'd be like, hey, I need to stop this before it gets going. And so I'd go downstairs, and I'd say like 7 or 8 times out of 10, I was right. There was someone, and a lot of the time it would be like, people would be like, no, like I turned my stuff off. And then someone would like pull out their phone to see if it was turned off, and it was on, that kind of thing. And so it took a lot of that kind of experience over many years. And I still, honestly, I'm just like kind of dense about this. Like, I'm still doubtful that my symptoms actually are real and connected to this thing, because you just like, it's just one of those things. It's probably my conditioning that just says, like, you can't see it, you can't touch it. Like,
you also just have that about you. Like, you have just like a very naturally questioning demeanor, sometimes to the point of like detriment, even about yourself.
In this case, it is detrimental, because it's like, I've collected enough evidence over so many years to be like, it's to me personally, it's irrefutable. I would have to convince someone else that didn't know me, right? Of course. But for me, it's like, if I just look at the evidence that I've gathered, it's like very obvious that it's beyond just some random possibility that I'm concluding, and it's all psychosomatic or something like that. It's so funny, because that's the first thing that people jump to when they don't know your story and they don't understand how much digging and how much trial and error you had to do. It took me at least 5 years of just trial and error to even come to the conclusion that it was possible that electrosensitivity was a thing. And when I started researching on the web, there was nothing. Like, now there's a ton of info, but when I started researching in the early days, it was like, there was nothing on the web about that. I mean, there was nothing on the web. It was just a weird place. Like websites just had like weird spinning, flashing icons, and you didn't know what to read on a web page. But, people would say, and even to this day, they'll be like, well, it sounds psychosomatic. And it's like, I get it. I totally get it. But there are these things that we're sensitive to, that just because we can't see it, it's like, well, that same force is what gives you your service in your phone or, your laptop or whatever. So it's like, it's got some power.
There.
It's obviously got some force. And wireless routers in particular, or cell phone towers, are designed to broadcast, right? They're designed to actually amplify those frequencies, that signal, right? So when you start thinking of it in these terms, and the fact that like we're electromagnetic in nature, in my opinion, and so it can interfere, right? One of the theories is that it can interfere with cell-to-cell communication and other things. But anyway.
So I'm going to like draw the line. So Thailand to Hawaii, Jameson and I lived at that same community, just at different times. So we had mutual friends. And then you did you go from Hawaii to Mexico? Or we could just skip to this part where it was like right before you came to California, which is where like the actual story takes place.
Exactly. Let's just get to the story for the love of God.
No, this is all the part of the story that I remember hearing is that like Matt and John had this friend. He had lived at Pangaea just at a different time, and he was in Mexico and he had this crazy rash on his liver. And so he had to come to California
That's right. Okay. That's the best story to tell, right?
That's like how you got to California. So totally. That's the story that I heard was there was this person who was like really sick in Mexico and he was going to come to California essentially to convalesce at Matt and John's house, which was in many ways, people came to that house in Northern California and stayed with the two twins that we were all friends with. And so Jameson came to stay with them and like recover.
Okay. Yeah. So basically Thailand, Hawaii, back to the US, lived in LA for a year, saw Augenus, tried Primal Diet, was like, oh shit, this isn't actually fixing me. It's not fixing my whatever this is. And so then I went to Costa Rica. And in Costa Rica, I actually discovered noni fruit. And so, and funny enough, this was my first or second connection to like someone that knew that raw foodist person that we're going to talk about later. But essentially, I ended up living on this person's couch that I met online in Costa Rica. I was actually living in the north on this guy's farm. There's so many crazy details, but basically, like, I'm living on her couch for, I don't know, a year. And this is such a miraculous thing that happened. But basically, one night, I'm having all these crazy symptoms. There's a wireless router in the hall. Mm-hmm. And one night, my friend Lane that I'm living with now is like, hey, have you ever tried noni? And I was like, yeah, a couple times. But she's like, oh, we should do some noni drinks. So she blended up some noni.
Okay, wait, explain noni though, Jameson. Okay, because so noni isn't
noni
like,
is
that's fruit.
Yeah, I know, sorry.
You say noni fruit, but like.
I say things like they're self-evident, and it's so obviously bizarre and not self-evident. So the noni fruit is this very strange, cheesy, rotten garbage smelling, like pod like thing about the size of a lemon. They can be a little larger, a little smaller, and it's just absolutely loaded with these rock hard seeds that you can't chew. They would break your teeth out. You can't.
They
blend
call
them.
it the blue cheese fruit.
Yeah, that's one of the names, or garbage fruit. People call it garbage fruit or just cheese fruit. And it has really interesting anti-inflammatory properties, and it's actually been studied quite a bit. I think there's a lot of research out of the University of Hawaii. Yeah. She blends it up, and then she has this, like, those cheesecloth, those hippie cheesecloth bags where it's like the hand juice. You have to do that with noni because you can't put it through a juicer because the little seeds will just wreck your blades. So you just wait till it's really ripe when it smells like shit, and you throw it in your blender with a little bit of water and just blend it and then push it through. So I literally take my first drink and I suddenly have a sense of peace and well-being that I hadn't had in probably 10 or 15 years come over me. Like, so profound and overwhelming that it was almost like a religious experience. You know what I mean? It's like one of those moments where you're just, I don't know if I started crying, but I definitely felt like crying because I had been, up until that point, I had gotten so sensitive. My nervous system was so raw that I couldn't even walk around downtown San Jose without feeling like cars were like driving over me, like the sound was so intense for me. So I'd have to walk around with earplugs, and I'd go and sleep in the park. And actually a couple times the cops like came and messed with me with sticks because they thought that I was homeless or something. They didn't understand I was trying to just like connect with the ground and just calm down because my heart was constantly racing. It was like a hypertension kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And the noni just smoothed it out. And so I just became like completely obsessed because I finally found something that worked. And within a couple of days, the rash was gone. Like it just knocked it out completely. And I was sleeping well for the first time in years. Something about the inflammation kept part of my nervous system awake or something.
Yeah, that's
so
like, I would say it that way, where it's like when I met you, your nervous system was so high strung. Yeah, it was just,
and that was way better than I was.
And sympathetic.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was in sympathetic all the time. And it's funny because when you met me, I was like Mr. Calm compared to what I was when I was in Costa Rica. Like I was a fucking basket case.
Yeah,
dude. Like you could just put a clown face on me and some stilts and just send me out. I was just like whacked.
So totally Lane taught you about Noni, and then she also had some connection.
Well, she learned from.
Well, you can say his name, and we'll beep it out.
She learned from. So
okay,
she's friends with at the time, and he used to stay with her when he'd come through Costa Rica sometimes, and they'd have like Noni parties, And funny enough, I tried Noni in Hawaii, but I never did it in this way where I had a problem and I had a baseline and I was measuring, like what happens if I do that. I never even thought of it in that way. So,
and also in Hawaii, it was like where you were living down there on Papaya Farms Road was like completely off grid. It's like you likely didn't have the inputs that you probably had in the middle of a city. So yeah, that's just my guess. Is like you may not have had the same response.
I mean, in Thailand, the fruit was around too. Like Noni just grows there, but I never thought to eat it. Like just because, I don't know. I just found, maybe you guys have found this too, just through when you do your own trial and error, sometimes it's the thing that you're stumbling over for years. It's right in front of you. That was the clue and the answer and everything, but you just couldn't see it because why would you? And then I found this little book while I was staying at Lane's that was written by I think Lane just had it laying around her apartment. It was written by a stewardess who had developed serious health problems from the pesticides that they sprayed at the time between flights and all of the radiation she was exposed to in the air and all, she was just falling apart basically. And she had chronic fatigue and whatever. And so she was in Hawaii and this like Hawaiian shaman type of person, like a kahuna, introduced her to the Noni. And when she first tried it, she fell asleep for 3 days. That's her story. That's what she says. I think that's what it was. It was like 3 days. And she woke up and didn't realize the time had passed and like started recovering, And so she set out to like write this book about the miracles of Noni. And dude, it was so heartfelt. Even thinking about it now, like chokes me up a little bit because she spoke about Noni as like this, as a friend that wants to help you, like that it has consciousness and that it is considered adaptogenic, right? And so you could say that that's a metaphor in a way for like something that has consciousness that knows where to go and what to do in your body. And or you could reverse it and say that, well, someone's just giving it like anthropomorphizing something that's just a fruit that has amazing properties. But whatever the case, like she had these experiences with Noni where the seeds were floating in her glass and she was going to go and eat ice cream and the seeds talked to her like telepathically. I know it sounds so fucking crazy, but basically the seeds said something like, why would you do that to yourself? And she was like, do what? And they were like, why would you eat something that is going to, harm you while you're trying to heal? Like we're trying to heal you. And I don't know, man, that book, like it's so fun. I should see if I can get a hold of it. Cause
you should find it.
It was like a 20-minute read. It was like a little kid's book, almost like a picture book with just like simple stories about her. But it was like so profound because I was in the middle of this experience where I was like how on earth did I find something that knew what to do? Like that knew where to go and what to do. And
to not for nothing, like you had tried instinctive eating, the primal diet, which is no small feat.
Yeah, like we shorten these periods of time, but I went through a lot of stages of.
And you tried different supplements and lifestyles and and so it's like when you just take a drink of this, like you're saying, it's not an appetizing fruit.
No,
fruit is the wrong term. I mean, it is
exactly. It's not like a fruit.
Yeah, it's like really calling like a zucchini a fruit. I mean, yeah, okay, but yeah. So
I found the book.
So no way.
Yeah, Diana Fairchild is the flight attendant that wrote it. I'm pretty sure this must be it.
I think that's it. Yeah.
You can get it on Amazon. Well, maybe. It says there's one left in stock from the seller.
This is just so you know, like, I just want to put the caveat out there. It's like, it's not going to be for everyone. Like, I was in a really vulnerable, like, kind of hypersensitive, permeable state. And it came to me at a time when, you know, I described that experience, right? That it was like religious the first time that I had the noni. And so it was like, it tied into that for me. You know, it felt like she was speaking directly to me. And she was like the bridge between me and Noni, because I wasn't hearing telepathically. I wasn't hearing the seeds talk to me or anything, which would have been cool, actually. But
so you're at Lane's in Costa Rica, and then do you go from Costa Rica to Mexico?
Okay, so Costa Rica, I at some point I decided I wanted to buy some land, and there was this opportunity that, like, somehow I got connected with these people in Mexico, and it looked good. It was in
the Yucatan.
It was outside of Playa del Carmen in the jungle. So I started, while I was there, I had this brilliant idea this is where Audrey comes back into the picture here, because I started doing what he calls
like a fat flush, essentially.
It's specifically a liver related, like you basically, you mix coconut cream.
Raw coconut cream.
Yeah. So you juice coconut meat, like old coconut meat, the thick white stuff, and you add lime to it, and the lime acts to help it make it basically into a solvent. It like drives it into the liver and starts to look. I am living proof. This thing will clean your liver out to the point where it'll kill you if you do too much of it. And I did too much of it.
Which, by the way, in Hawaii, we used to call dying the ultimate detox as like a joke, because people would take things so far.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even going to tell you the crazy things we saw people eat, but we were like, oh, they're going for the final or the ultimate detox, because it's just going to take them right off the earth.
This was almost my final detox. Actually, I've almost final detoxed quite a few times. I'm pretty sure I have 9 lives. So I was doing like something like a pint of this stuff a day. And I think it's like, you're supposed to be doing like a shot worth or something, you know. I was doing a pint. And after about 5 or 6 days of this, I started getting an actual bruise above my liver. Like my liver was bleeding. Like it was like pushing out. Like there was so much happening with my liver, and it couldn't deal with the, you know, whatever the job of moving that much stuff through. I don't know how it all works really, but
okay. And also for context for people, we made raw coconut cream in Hawaii often. It was like this delicacy. It was delicious, Hannah. Oh my God. It was so delicious. It's so good. You want to eat a lot of it. Like you can dip apples in it or fruit in it. And it's this like delicious fat, except here's the thing that happens. And nobody told me this the first night we ate it. We like eat it. And then you're like, ooh, more. You want to mix like some honey and cocoa and make like a chocolate or whatever. You eat so much. So then I go to bed in this fairly new environment in the middle of the jungle down in Puna in Hawaii. There's no light. If you don't have a headlamp, you're completely lost. And I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, I am going to shit the bed. Like I've got to get up to the front of the land where the outhouse is. 10 minutes ago, I should have been there. So I just start stumbling around in the dark, trying to like make it to the outhouse, which never happened. I tried to find the best place possible to just like relieve myself and get back into bed. But it's like, my point is this stuff was incredibly moving. Like you're gonna really go. And you're gonna go.
So it's different than like taking coconut oil.
Totally. Yeah, it's like a different.
It has a different effect. There's some synergistic effect with the lime and the coconut cream that I've never seen with anything else. And it's just,
if you can't go to the bathroom, you will after you take that.
It's explosive. Like it's like rocket fuel. And I rocket fueled myself almost to the point of I was like vomiting and shitting, and like I had this. My liver was bleeding, and I was like, I don't think I should have this stain above my, like, what is this red mark above my liver, you know? And so I actually contacted Matt, and then he connected me with Jen, which is someone else that we know that was in the Pangai community. And she was like, by any chance, were you doing coconut cream? Like, I described my symptoms and I didn't tell her what I was doing. She was like, and how much of it were you doing? And I told her, and she's like, man, you're like, that's insane. Like, you're in danger, you know? So that's when I decided to go to California. And yeah.
So that's where Jameson and I met. That's when we intersect. Is we got
2008
there.
California.
It was like, I need a place where I can go, where I could know that I can get good quality food, because Mexico was tough for me to find my food sources. And I was still pretty fixated on eating like raw meat and, you know,
and we were still eating a lot of that. Like when we were in Northern California, a lot of us, Hannah, moved from Hawaii to Northern California. And so we were just like all in this little town together. And we were still, a lot of us, eating Primal Diet and, you know, pretty focused on that.
Or a loose version. Like, I still eat raw meat to this day because it works for me. But like, I've loosened up since then. I was still at that time pretty fixated on needing. I just didn't want to revert back to that state that I described, right? So, you know, you're willing to do anything for it. So
this is kind of where, like, we're going to skip a little bit because we were in Northern California for a little while, but eventually Jameson rents this house in Northern California, and Victor comes back into the picture. So Jameson and Victor have been friends for, you know, years at this point. And Victor is like, hey, I have gotten hooked up with. And
no. He didn't really bring up. Was like a total aside. He basically. Okay. So sorry. I just want to make sure we get it right.
This is like what actually, I mean, we brought Jameson on to, like, obviously tell these stories, but this is the title of the podcast. Really, from like a big point of view, the influence to death part of, you just kind of never know where these products are coming from unless you really do your due diligence to find out. And this is the story kind of behind one particular product.
Okay.
So basically, Victor approached me. I already knew that he was like working with or supporting. I don't know if he was like helping to pay the rent of Travis, but Travis, okay, so we'll describe Travis. Travis was an older gentleman who was a genius and had a photographic memory for chemistry. Like, he memorized chemistry, you know, texts from front to back, and had been in prison for some things that we'll get into, but basically, like, he had a sordid past. He was a genius and kind of misunderstood and a little ornery and like difficult to deal with. And he was making gold ormus for many years. Now,
what is gold ormus?
Okay, so gold ormus is it's one of those theoretical things, right? It's like, there's not really conventional scientific proof that it even exists, but it's supposed to be a unique state of matter, the monoatomic state. And because there's monoatomic versions of other metals too, but of gold, it's basically where the gold goes into this state and has very unique properties in terms of, so people attribute it to having spiritual properties, and we'll talk about that, but also,
like some people call it like alchemical gold,
like it's supposed to like raise your vibration, whatever that is. It's supposed to, you know, support your immune system, and supposed to help you assimilate food better. And, you know, it's one of those general, claim all kind of things, right?
Got it.
And there's a lot of people out there that claim that they've made, you know, Gormus gold, and they're selling it on their site. And then other people who are saying that they're testing all these products and they're almost all bullshit except the one that they make. And you know what I mean? It's just like one of those products. And believe me, I have experimented with a lot of weird products like this, because when you're desperate, you have to just suspend. You don't have to, but my nature is to just suspend my preconceptions about things and be like, you know what? Like, I can't know unless I try this. So I've done everything from like ordering some little mirror that goes on your wall with a fucking dolphin on it. It's supposed to like deflect all the electromagnetic stuff away from you. And it's like $400. And it's just like someone glued a bunch of pieces of mirror on a plastic with a little hanger. And it's like, it would cost like $3 at a cheap Chinese store in a city. And it's like, and then you try to return it and they're like, they have a restocking fee of like $80. You're like, what do you have, a warehouse full of like plates with mirrors and dolphins? And there's so much demand that you don't have room to put this on your shelf. Like that kind of crazy shit, I've done so much of that stuff. So like, I understand that there's a lot of bullshit out there, like so much snake oil bullshit. But I also understand that if you're really willing to do that, you are going to probably stumble into some things that actually work, that look like they're just as much bullshit as all the rest of the stuff. And that's the amazing thing about this product as we get into it. Like, it sounds like complete bullshit, but this is one of the products that actually helped me for quite a period of time, because I didn't have noni when I went back to the US. I was like, so at first they were shipping it to me from Hawaii, and then
in like a cardboard box, in like a plastic bag with the stinkiest. It's like the only fruit that's more stinky would be like durian, right? Which people have more. Noni is
equally as stinky. It's just not
terrible.
Quite the same smell.
So people at the post office in Grass Valley,
it was fermenting like, what are by the time
doing?
It arrived.
Yeah,
it was fermenting. Like, imagine this bubbling, like fart laden, like garbage smelling thing that's bubbling out of the package and leaking. And like, it's full of fucking seeds. Like, you can't just ship seeds from Hawaii to the mainland.
Yeah, you can't.
And
You're
so,
not supposed to.
like, we got away with it a few times, but then, and it was amazing. It would arrive and I'd be like, oh, thank God. Like, I have my noni, for the next, whatever, like 2 or 3 weeks. And the amazing thing is noni is so acidic that if you refrigerate it, it actually like keeps from oxidizing and super fermenting for quite some time. Like it's like 2 or 3 acidity. I think.
It's like, when you drink it, like burns, kind of.
Oh, it's really astringent. Yeah.
Interesting.
And so, like super sour and astringent. So got caught shipping it to me. He still is okay. So is another friend that was living at Pangaea. These are all the characters that, like, oh man, all the characters in these dramas. But basically, when he goes into the U.S., every time he goes to cross back into the U.S., they see his record of having, and it doesn't say, it's kind of like if you get, fined for peeing in an alley and it says you're a sex offender,
Yeah.
Right.
And you're like, I pissed in an alley, but it doesn't say peed in an alley. It says sex offender on your,
So it says he's like a smuggler or something.
Yeah, it says like he like shipped illicit materials or something like that. And so like, basically to this day, I feel bad about it. Like, he gets hassled every fucking time he goes back in because of trying to help me, And so that was a lost cause. We just hit a wall with the noni. So I needed another answer. And,
Did you get the Ormus the first time from Victor?
Yeah. So I got it. I can't actually remember the chain of events here, but I don't remember if I tried it before or after. But I'm pretty sure I tried it before Travis came to live with me, because why would I be so motivated to like help him?
Right. So again, just to like clarify for people, Jameson rents this house in Northern California.
Like this weird, like dark, like 70s style. I mean, there was scorpions in that house.
Yeah, it was a funny house.
Like, it was like carpeted in this weird way, and like these horrible old cupboards, and it just felt bad. It felt unsafe. That's the best way to say it. It's just like you felt like you were living in a black hole or something, So,
it was like shag carpet, but it had this huge garage. So Jameson's living in this house alone. It has this huge garage. Victor is connected with Travis, this chemist who is supposedly making the Ormus gold. And Victor is like, hey, Jameson, Travis needs a place to live and work.
Like he's losing this place. I can't afford to pay the rent, or whatever the story was. I don't remember. And I was thinking like, yeah, like I love crazy people. Like, come on in. And so
you had an interest in this product that he was making.
I mean, I obviously wasn't thinking that, but it would have been smart for me to think that. So I basically was like, oh wow, cool. Someone who's like making this product that is seemingly helping me and helping other people, and he needs a place, and I have a garage, and no big deal. He can come and stay there for, like, I'm not thinking through the logistics. It's very strange. Like,
this is where it gets into the person who is the chemist that is making I don't even know what he calls it, but the monoatomic gold.
It's just monoatomic gold.
And we're going to blank out these names,
Ormus
right?
gold.
Like, the Ormus gold that it is being sold on its website. Comes to live in Jameson's filthy, dirty garage and in this
like it was
weird
filthy.
house.
Like, it's not like the garage was cleaned out. Like, picture just like, I described the house. So imagine the garage, right? The garage is like worse than the house, and it hasn't been cleaned. And he moves all of this like full on lab equipment. Like,
it's a chemistry
lab equipment, like titration machines and
Bunsen burners,
and all kinds of vials, and like all of the equipment to like this. Just to put it in perspective, like it's not like he didn't know what he was doing. Like, Travis was really sophisticated in this way. Like, he knew what he was doing. He was doing it fly by night, right? Like, he only had so many resources, and he'd melt down gold coins that were like 99.99% purity or whatever, and use that as the gold in there. It's not easy to melt gold, by the way. You can't just melt it with heat. Like, it's like, you're not just gonna like put it in a fire and melt it. You know, you need special chemical. I'm laughing because she's laughing, and I can understand because this whole thing's so absurd. But it's like, okay, so like,
Travis shows up with not just like a regular size U-Haul. It's like a massive U-Haul.
Victor has like hit a bridge on the way over with the top of the truck, which has to be some kind of like
sign. It was a sign,
foreshadowing of like what was to come. But he shows up and the top of the truck's all dead, and he's like, I paid full insurance, so it's no big deal. And the truck is like completely full of, like, I had no idea what I was getting into, full, brimming with lab equipment and tables, and so just suddenly a lab sprung to life in this dirty ass garage. And like, the floor was just like a dirty garage. Like,
it was
like, it's not the kind of environment where you want to be making like anything sterile, let alone anything.
It's also not at all sorry, Hannah, you talk for a second.
Hannah, what the hell? Go ahead. Do you have any questions or comments?
I'm just like absorbing. I have so many questions and comments.
Okay.
So no one wanted to clean the garage first, because
I have a bad habit.
Vacuum it out?
Because
useless.
For one, like, it wasn't my deal. I was just like you're the scientist, like, create a science environment, you know, like what?
But he didn't clean it.
No, he just was kind of I mean, I'm not putting him down, okay? Like just logistically speaking, he was just a dirty guy. Like, he was a dirty person that did things in a dirty way. Like there was ashtrays around full of cigarettes. There was cigarette smoke billowing in the garage the whole time. Like, his poor cat was sitting there breathing the smoke all the time. And he would have these like little meltdowns where he would stomp his feet and walk in circles when things like weren't going right, or he would be frustrated about something external, or it was very strange. But like,
he was just he was like a very eccentric. He was an eccentric person.
You know, someone like that, they're not gonna. It's forest for the trees, right? Like, he's focused on the product.
Focused on like Ormus gold.
Yeah,
and
he's not. He could be on the moon or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, he'd make it wherever he was.
Doing his job.
Yeah.
And so he's making this for, who's then at that point still a pretty famous guy.
Huge.
Huge.
Hannah,
actually, that was still. I don't know if it was the peak, but it was in his era of like big time.
He was having that huge summit every year.
Yeah. And so this isn't like, this is a supplement. There's no regulation, zero regulation.
I mean, it's just water. I mean, it's essentially silica. It's just silica and gold.
Right.
You know, that's all it is. So, you know, gold has a pretty safe track record, you know, like, unless you're like injecting nano gold or something like, like I would argue that like I don't think anything could go wrong as far as poisoning people.
Right.
It was pretty benign in that way.
Just like, as a consumer.
Yeah. Like if you saw it, you would never in a million years want to order it. Like actually, it would be so funny to put up pictures of the garage and be like state of the art, and then just show like this fucking crazy.
This is the whole reason for the podcast, is because the portrayal of the elixir as this like light emitting gold angel wings. Yes, exactly. Is the complete opposite of how it was being made in my buddy's garage by this like extremely eccentric scientist with like a cigarette hanging out of his mouth with an ash on it that was like 2 inches long, like
having temper tantrums.
Yeah, having temper tantrums. That was the vibe. And then it would be bottled up and shipped, wherever to the distribution site.
These beautiful purple glass, I think there were, bottles that, blocked out because it was sensitive to light and
probably also sensitive to cigarette smoke, but that was
that's the thing, right? But you would see it, interestingly, you would see it like flocculate, you would see it come out of solution. If it was like exposed to extreme temperatures or in the light for a while, you would see these flakes of gold and it would turn into a colloid and they would drop to the bottom. But before that, it was totally in solution. You could just see that with your eyes.
So basically it's like kind of like dissolved gold.
It's dissolved gold.
So you're drinking this dissolved gold tonic, and as a consumer, you're like trusting this big name.
Huge name, yeah.
You're like, oh, it's $111. This was made in a state of the art like lab and
by like angels.
Totally. Like angels in lab coats.
Yeah. Yes. And just to set the record straight, to date, I do not believe in this product. I have been skeptical for the past 15 years. I remain skeptical today. No disrespect, Jameson.
It's totally fine.
I just don't have any faith that anything is happening in there.
I understand why. Of course, I understand why you think that. I mean,
I'm just amazed. And it really, in my psyche, set in motion the wheels of like, oh my God, you can't trust anything. Like, this is where this comes from.
If I didn't have a baseline, to test these kinds of things with, I would think exactly the same thing as you. Yeah. I would think like this was a complete, it just looks like a bunch of, you saw the Works burger and it looked like a clown show. It's like, how could anything good come out? Like, let alone healing, like anything that wasn't contaminated with cigarette smoke and cat shit
hair. Yeah. Okay. So let's also clarify, did this, at the time, very well-known raw food influencer, he actually came to your house and checked this out. So he knew.
Oh, so he knows the situation.
Well, okay. Yes. And okay. So I don't know how much he knew up to the point where he came, but I guess through word of mouth or Travis told him or whoever, once he arrived, he knew who I was, and he tried to blow smoke up my ass right from the get-go, like saying things like, oh, it's the infamous Jameson and stuff. It, like things that just made me want to puke. I was like, what? Like, and then I was pissed already because I knew the situation leading up to that, which was that, Travis didn't have a fucking place to live. And this guy was selling his products on his website and making money off him. And this was an important product I know that at some point he actually had worked with Travis to try to figure out the formula of how to do this. And Travis finally cracked it. But up until that point, he was very involved. And then it was just like, there was some disconnect where Travis didn't have a home, but was like selling his, not that he should be responsible for Travis just because he's selling one of his products, but I think that there was a connection. Go ahead.
Oh, was he getting paid?
Well, that's the other part of it. Like, we couldn't even afford, there was a few other people involved. There was this guy, Kenny.
This is going to get so, I mean, how much time do we have?
It's really, basically, long story short, like, with Travis came a lot of chaos. And when came with his minions, because I don't know what else to call them. He had like an entourage of like little young worshiping, hippie, like raw vegan, whatever.
Yeah, always. Yeah.
He said something to me in the garage that I still, I still don't know if this is what he said because it's so stupid and so absurd that I think I must have heard wrong or I must have distorted the memory. So I'm not sure, but I think at some point he was talking to his entourage about like products and selling products and stuff. And he said something to the degree of, I could sell ice to an Eskimo. And at that point I was like, this person's a complete piece of shit. Like there's no, like it's all just image, and the image is that he cares and that he's genuinely personally involved in it. But what he was showing me through his words behind the scenes was, people have a public image and a private image, or a private, personality. And for some reason, he was letting me see this other thing. And I just kind of lost my shit. I started yelling at him and basically was like, this is bullshit. Like you abandoned this guy that's making your product. Like, where the fuck were you all this time? And you could see like it got really uncomfortable in the garage, and everyone was like, and I was like, what have I done? Like I'm just like.
But it's also just your way. I mean, it's why we're good friends. It's because we'll both call a spade a spade. Yeah,
and I'm not very tactful at times. I'll just blurt stuff out. At that point, I was kind of shaking with just disgust and anger at the situation, and he was just making excuses, and there was nowhere to go with it, So they slept there that night. They just slept on the floor with their like grounding mats and stuff on the carpet. And I went into the bedroom and I basically just like disappeared for the night. And when I came out in the morning, they were gone. That's my memory. Maybe I had talked to them in the morning, but I didn't see them again. Like I basically was like, I don't even want to see your face. And then actually he ended up making good on it. He ended up paying the rent at the house for quite a few months. So his organization like stepped up, and that was partly due to talking to him about it, but it was the right thing to do. Like Travis was basically taking up half the house with his stuff, and that was compensating for all of the, whatever, the shit that he'd put him through and benefiting from his product without, taking care of him. Because he really needed taken care of. Travis wasn't a guy that could like just survive on his own.
Yeah, he wasn't like going to fit into civilization. Yeah.
It was like abuse to be selling his product and just leave him on his own to his own devices. So that's this long story short. And then there was some crazy stuff that happened in between with like when I went away for a couple of weeks. Travis broke his arm getting something down, and then. Oh, he was connected to the Hells Angels because he'd been in prison and he made meth for them for a while. Yeah.
And it gets so much crazier even than what we're telling you. We can't even, we just don't have time.
Like, basically, I came back to the house and Liz explained that he had to clean up human shit from all over the house because the Hells Angels went in and ate every single pill in the house to get high. They eat bottles of antibiotics, bottles of vitamin C, every fucking pill that they could find. They just consumed it. And then they shit all over the house.
This is your house.
A bottle of laxatives on top of the vitamin C.
That's the house that the garage was at, that the $111 raw food elixir was being made at.
And so they shit on the carpets and then just drag the furniture over the shit. And so he'd see some shit that was just there out in the open, but then he'd move the furniture to find like surprise turds under the couches and stuff and have to clean all that up. And they brought like lice into the house. And so Travis had locked himself in his room for like 3 or 4 days. He says all he had was water and a loaf of bread. It's like biblical or something. And he basically just was in there like praying that these guys just left, because they were banging on his door and they just, they knew him. They wanted to get high, and they figured he could make them some meth, I guess. And he didn't want to make meth anymore.
Wow.
And Hannah, for real, it is so much more even than this, but we have to.
I wish we had led with that story. That's bizarre. So wait, what happened to Travis?
I don't know.
Where is Travis?
Okay, so one of the guys that was involved with the Ormus and I decided it would be best for the cat, because the cat was just going to die of lung cancer if it continued to be in there breathing the smoke. So we told them that the cat disappeared.
We took the cat. We took the cat to Matt and John.
Right, but it was Kenny and I that told Travis, like,
okay.
hey, remember? Yeah, we took it. But
and the cat turned into like this like darling mascot.
Such a lovely, amazing
of our entire
cat.
community.
Yeah. And she was so jumpy and afraid of people before that. So you could see like she was just traumatized from all of his antics and meltdowns. Mm-hmm. And would be like jumpy, like, oh, when's the next meltdown? Like an abused child. And once she had a couple of months of just care and doting, and all he fed her was tuna for years, and her thyroid ended up failing because of that, because she probably got mercury toxicity or something. But basically, she just became a really sweet cat. So, but there was another component I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, whatever happened to Travis?
Oh yeah, so basically, at some point, Kenny and I devised something. We just told him like it was best. Oh, we arranged for him to go somewhere else. We connected him with someone else that said they were willing to house him. And he went off with his truck without brakes. His truck literally had like 2% of its brakes. Like he'd come squealing down the hill to the place.
He couldn't stop.
Dude, I never knew whether he was going to crash into the house or crash into a person or whatever.
And meantime, this house was a rental.
It was a rental in a neighborhood with like an ex-cop two doors down, and just like it was just so intense being there because you just never knew. Like I didn't know until well into to him living with me that he'd been accused of building a nuclear warhead in a garage in another house, and he had legitimately actually built an electron scanning microscope out of just whatever spare parts. Like he was a genius, but like he's claimed that he never built the warhead. That was a misinterpretation of. And then he was accused of making meth, which he actually says he didn't, but he did prison time, and he was so pissed about it that in prison he actually learned how to make meth, created a little pamphlet called 101 Ways to Make Meth, and sent it out to all the people involved in his case, politicians, lawyers. And then when he got out, if I'm not mistaken, I have the events right. When he got out, then he actually made meth for the Hells Angels for some time in order to just support himself, because he was like, fuck you. Like, you put me in prison for nothing. Now I'm going to make meth. And so when the Hells Angels came to the house, I'm sure they were looking for meth. I think Travis might have been making a little supply of meth for himself when he was at the house, because his behavior was so strange.
So it was a meth house and an Optimus Gold house.
Opus. Oh, Optimus! It's the Ormus Gold. Yeah.
Ormus Gold.
That's like the Transformers meets Ormus Gold. Optimus Gold. Okay,
and
but
so like now he doesn't sell this anymore.
No, well, it's still on his website. It's just out of stock.
I would assume that Travis is no longer with us in this earthly plane, because he was in bad shape at that time. He was already like in really rough.
He was older. He was a heavy smoker.
Yeah. His feet were in really
bad shape.
Like he had trouble
diabetes.
Walking.
Yeah.
Probably like the Ormus was keeping him. This is one of those things. Like I saw a few cases of this. Like I understand again why Victoria thinks it doesn't work, but like, without the noni in my life, I would start getting the rash stuff again. I would start getting the inflammation would start ramping up, and the Ormus was able to. I would just put it on externally, and it just kept my skin in good condition. And I'd start noticing the signs of the rash, and it would like reset my skin. Mm-hmm. Part of the theory actually they developed was that it changes the polar bond angle of the protons of the water molecule. And so it simply makes water easier for the cell to use.
Yeah.
Like that it's a simple process, and that if you make the water easier to use, then any process in the body that involves water is going to be more efficient, it was a good theory, and it might be true. And I certainly saw it did something amazing. Like it definitely did something, but there was zero spiritual aspect. In fact, the funny thing about it is that it's such a large part of the Ormus mythology that, and it's such a nothing burger part of the reality of it. Like in my opinion, you're never going to get enlightened from taking like just some passive thing. Like you have to work at whatever evolution that's going to be bestowed on you, Mm-hmm. And there was a girl in our kind of group of friends from Hawaii as well. Her name was Chula, and she wanted some of this, and so I brought her a bottle, and I specifically said, this works great for some physical things. It's not going to help your enlightenment. It's not going to raise your vibration or whatever. And she said, well, I think it will. And I was like, but I've been experimenting with it for years. I mean, okay, but based on what? Like, so that was her reason for doing it. So for her, it was like, well, of course it's going to do that. If this is legitimate, I'm going to get enlightened. I never talked to her again after that. I don't know what happened. Maybe she got enlightened, but
she was great.
Maybe she got enlightened.
She might have gotten enlightened. I don't know.
She just ascended. Okay, so that's the story of that.
That's the gist of it. Yeah. And Travis is probably passed on, and he really was like, man, he was a fucking genius. And given the right environment, and the right like lab or equipment or whatever, he could have done just miraculous things. I really think he could have done amazing things, but it's just not how it went. It wasn't his lot. And he did this amazing thing with like in this crazy environment. And, the funny thing is like, it's such a mixed bag because in my opinion, it was an amazing product. But of course, if anyone knew how it was made, no one ever would have used it. And it's only fair to let people know like the conditions that something was produced in. So there you go.
Yeah. And I mean, even though it was produced in that way, it doesn't take away, it could be an amazing product. Like that's not going to change. What's in the bottle isn't going to change. It's just like, to me, this farce of like this guy who has this huge following, a cult-like following. He's supposed to be enlightened. He's going to heal you with all these amazing things. And he's a fucking asshole who is out to make money, like he blatantly said to you, and is taking advantage of this, poor man for his genius abilities, who has all this other stuff going on with the Hells Angels and making meth and prison history and all this complex
nuclear
stuff.
Bombs in garages.
Like what? My face. I wish everybody could see my face. Like I'm just like listening with my mouth open, but it's just it really embodies what we're trying to kind of bring to the surface on this podcast. Is like, just because this person has a huge following, has this image that's curated, you see scrolling on your phone, has a blog, has like all of these solutions and answers to everything, that could all be bullshit. Like, you don't know this person. Like, they're just a person like you, and they may be
that's it.
Just as fucked up as you, or even more.
Yep. Like, I think you're hitting on it. He's just a human, and he's flawed like everyone else. And it's sad that humans have this tendency to like idolize people in this way where they seem faultless. It's just it's not a healthy thing that we do. And we do it like
so much.
We turn these like health people, just people who have some interesting products or interesting like outside the box advice, into like movie stars. Those are like the movie stars of the health world, the alternative health world. Was one of the first movie stars of that world.
He was. He really was.
I will say, just to balance some of the other things I said about him, like for one, he stepped up and paid the rent in the house. Like he like stepped up to make it right. And
well,
two,
I think he did that because you called him out, and he was probably a little bit fearful of your power, of like not being afraid to do something about that situation.
Maybe, but anyway, I just want to say, it's funny how I want to connect it back to the Noni thing, because it was actually part of the reason why I discovered this thing that helped me for so many years and was really like a pivotal, profound turning point in my life and in my health. And he actually does have some very interesting information and some really interesting products. And to throw the baby out with the bathwater is one of the things that we do that's in the same department as idolizing, right? It's just we want a nice, clean kind of thing. Like, oh, it's just this or it's just that. But it's like, there's more going on there. He's a complex person. He obviously had some ego things happening that really bothered me. But he's got some things too that are valuable. And then, like, for one, like, he was the first person to talk about noni of anyone in the world that I know of. And like,
to white people
for white, let's thank you.
Absolutely.
People were using it traditionally for a long time, but he totally brought it to like a mass audience.
I said the world. When I say the world, I mean the media world, right?
Right.
And the media world is like the white world or whatever, It's like what we're talking about. Like, obviously this thing was discovered by indigenous people, Polynesians, and other
Can you
people.
imagine? They were probably like, we are never going to eat that bullshit.
Yeah, they're like, what the fuck are these people doing, man? Like, I wouldn't wipe my ass with that stuff. But no, it really is.
Like, I think you're being really charitable to him because I feel like, he's complex, good and bad, but really it's like, it's someone who happened upon this really healing thing, like noni or Ormus Gold, and probably hundreds of other people away from like indigenous use and traditional use maybe tried it too, but that personality of like, I'm going to capitalize on this is the whole reason why. So it could have been anybody, but not everybody wants to capitalize on something, make money off it, profit, and seize those dollar signs. And so it's kind of like, I mean,
but noni's one of those things that in my opinion, any product that isn't fresh noni is useless, because I've experimented with all of them. It doesn't do anything. Maybe there's some tiny little anti-inflammatory thing, but I think he was probably capitalizing on it with, I don't know this, but probably like noni leather and noni powder and all those things that,
I mean, balance is something we talk about. We've, gotten there with every episode. It's like even Liver King and Paul Saladino and these guys that to me just look completely, or to Andrew especially, because he has so much experience in that world, look completely ridiculous. It's like there's benefit to all of this, and that's one of the problems. It's like we talked about this a lot on the Dr. Mercola episode with him, advising with the psychic. It's like, how do you disseminate the gold from the shit, which is completely apropos. It's like literal in this episode. It's like for people who maybe aren't research literate or who don't have the experiences that other people have, it's really hard to know, like, okay, well, what is helpful and what am I going to spend $111 on? And it's like total garbage. That's the part that's really hard, because in influencer world, everything is supercharged, amazing, going to transform your life, blow your tits off.
That's sales.
Like,
I mean,
that's sales and marketing. But like the goal of the podcast is for us to be like, hey, like really try and think this through a little, because not all of it is that. It just can't
like
be.
Realize that that's just sales and marketing. Try to figure out. The problem is like there's just so many variables. It's like, even if you get a good product, it doesn't mean it's going to work for you.
Sure.
And even if you get a good product and it works for other people that have your condition, it may not work for you. It's just like,
I mean, look, I had this conversation the other day with a friend about supplements, because actually, Hannah, we've talked about this a little bit. There is a friend that I have who might agree to come on to talk about microplastics as fillers in supplements.
Oh, shit.
Which is apparently this like very widespread practice in many, like, just like you go to Walmart or GNC and you buy supplements, microplastics are used as fillers in those supplements. And so, this person I was talking to was like, well, how do you know if it's a good supplement or not? And I was like, the crazy thing is like, even if you go through a very high level company, I'm not going to say any company names, but if you buy like the best nutraceuticals on the market, they only sell to people with professional accounts. Even then, one discrepancy that I see, and I know, Hannah, you see this a lot, they're selling probiotics that the efficiency is very questionable because they're not research-based. And the best probiotics that you can buy are at CVS most of the time, right? It's like you can buy very high-quality probiotics at CVS. So it's like, how do you know that? Well, we've been messing around in this world, for the past 15 or 20 years. So it's like, yeah, okay, we know that. But if somebody's just looking at an ad on Instagram or, see an ad on television, my family has bought supplements off television and been like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, I think you should have never bought it, but you got sold. It's nearly impossible. And so again, to kind of just reflect back, that is the goal of this entire podcast, is like, we are truly being influenced to death. it's not the products or even the person or their ideas. It's the influenced part that is deadly. The rest of it is a mixed bag. We can't know. So we need to learn some, way to kind of navigate that.
Yeah. What's that? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. It's sad, but they seem to be really susceptible to that particular law, if it is a law. And it's like people get enough attention and they, if you get enough feedback that you're a star and that you're great and that you're doing great things and you're amazing and
you're making a lot of money,
you're attractive and you're making a shit ton of money, which is more feedback that you're doing something helpful and it's like, you're just going to start to believe your own bullshit. It'd be really tricky not to start to believe your own bullshit.
Yeah, it would be tricky. It's hard. Okay. Well, Jameson, I think we're going to let Hannah, do you have a stop where you need to go?
Yeah, I do have a stop. Is there anything else we want to touch on?
No, I think that's great. I enjoyed talking to you guys. It's great.
Man,
I'm already like, we should come back and talk about EMFs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, and did you see Hannah's earrings?
No, let's see them.
I wore these because I heard you're also
oh shit, that's awesome.
They're really cool.
Those are so cool.
I would love to, because you're the UFO guy, right?
I don't know if I'm the UFO guy, but I'm into all kinds of weird stuff. So.
Is the answer to that.
We got to talk about that. That's going to be an episode.
Okay, cool. That would be great.
Thank you, Jameson. That was awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was such a great story.
I hope it wasn't too rambly.
It's okay. It's all
so many details, so many crazy fucking details. So
okay, you guys.
Great. I can't wait
to talk to both of you later. Yeah, and we'll send you. Yeah.
Okay, that would be cool. Okay, talk to you guys again.
Bye.